Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Autodesk booth and welcome to NAB 2013. My name is Bill Ennis, and I'm here to be your MC for the Flame user event tonight. So thank you so much for coming. I'd like to start by introducing the Vice President of Worldwide M&E Sales, Stig Grumman.
Is this working? There we go. Hey, everybody. How's it going? Good? End of day one. How crazy was NAB today?
Very busy, very busy.
Very busy. Thank you. I need a little, You could be like...
I'm here for
like
you.
The Johnny Carson,
Okay, I'm Ed McMahon.
Or
You're right,
who's...
Stig.
All right. So, I just wanted to take a few moments to walk you through, first of all, obviously, to join Bill and welcome you to this Flame After Hours event. And I'm actually going to start with a topic that's totally unintuitive. I want to talk about corporate logos. Can everybody hear me okay back there? Yeah? Okay. Oh, no, back.
He's got some setup for this.
I have setup, thank you. Okay, so corporate logos, I know everybody's like burning topic at the top of their mind. So Autodesk has completely revamped all of the corporate logos across the company except one. So for those of you who are deeply attached to the fish, we managed to pull off keeping the fish. The fish is alive and well, taking care of Flame. And so there was a bit of, some people may have seen an advanced peek, and it was about this big, and it wasn't obvious it was a fish. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understood. Long live the fish.
It's still there. It's actually a really cool fish, by the way.
It's an awesome fish.
And the fish logo will still exist in the software. You'll see it everywhere. So
where will they see that, Bill?
You'll see it in the little corner.
Are we going to see it later on this evening?
We'll see it in a little bit. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So I just wanted to get that little bit of fishness out of the way. All right.
Nothing too fishy.
None. Right. So next slide. Okay, so here you can actually see, and the rest of the creative finishing offerings that we have all are consistent with the translucent green of the fish that you now all know and love for the last 30 seconds. And so I just want to take a couple of seconds to talk about the 20th anniversary edition of Flame, which, as many of you know, we released at the end of October because it was a major paradigm shift in terms of what was Flame going to be for the next 20 years. And as many of you who are familiar with, whenever you have those kinds of changes in iconic applications like Flame and you're making that big a change, that's a lot of change to make. And for those of you who haven't been exposed to it, we are featuring Service Pack 3 of the 20th anniversary version of Flame. And all I can tell you is, for those of you who are waiting to see what Flame can really do, Service Pack is awesome. Bill and the rest of the gang are going to walk you through what does that mean. It's in terms of the first iteration at the end of October to where we are now, it's a dramatic change. It's a dramatic change, super stable, tons of performance, and I think one of the most important things that we wanted to share with you is that's all thanks to you. It's all thanks to the feedback that we got from the beta group in terms of making sure that Flame did what you needed it to do. So thank you for that. And but you know what? Don't believe me. We've got a bunch of folks who are much more knowledgeable about these things who are going to come up later on and walk you through that. So next slide. Let me walk you through exactly what we're going to be doing for the rest of our session. First of all, we're going to hear from Philippe Soireau, who's going to talk to you about kind of the latest and greatest iteration of the 20th anniversary version of Flame, Service Pack 3, as I've said, and some of the things that you want to do in terms of can you make that adoption, how do you make the transition as smooth as possible. So Philippe is going to walk through that. Afterwards, we've got Cédric Lejeune, who's going to come up and talk about color management, especially in terms of the work that we've done with ACES. And for those of you who are all over color, you'll know that that's like a major deal, and he's got some really interesting things to share with you. And then finally, we have Lynn Lepage, who's going to come up and who's got a great update in terms of all the resources that are available to you as you're trying to figure out how to ramp up to this latest version of Flame, amongst other topics. And that's what I wanted to mention to you all. I'm going to turn it over to Bill. Have a great Flame event, and long live the fish. Thanks, everybody.
We also have Larry Mahoney.
No, yes.
Right here in the front row.
Larry's, hey, Larry. So allow me to introduce Larry from HP, who have kindly sponsored our event this evening.
Did he ever stick around and find out? Well, Larry, tell us why.
Thanks, Stig. I'm Larry Mahoney. I'm the product manager for HP's Dreamcolor displays, and really glad to be here. Glad you all could come out to this great event. I'm very happy to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Flame with you tonight. And so if you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so for those of you that don't know, HP has been the exclusive supplier of workstations for M&E Autodesk M&E solutions since 2006.
Which is great.
7 years. And a few years ago, we launched the Dreamcolor display. That display, we were very proud that all 5 films nominated for Best Visual Effects at the Oscars this year were done on HP Dreamcolor displays. And the big news is that we're going to give one away tonight, so there will be a fishbowl moving around, and
That's
go ahead
right.
and put your
Notice it's a
card
fishbowl for the fish event
in there.
And Christina's got the bowl, so drop your card to win.
And at the end of the night, I guess you'll have a drawing for that.
Yes,
so.
we will.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your generosity. Thank you very
Thanks
much,
so much, Larry.
Appreciate it. Now with that,
And now,
that was kind of a
officially,
biggie to
that's
skip.
a big one. That's huge. It's not big, it's huge. Thank you, Larry, and HP. All right, Mr.
Now
Rennes,
we're ready
may
to
I
move
turn
on.
this over to you?
Please do.
All right.
Without further ado, I appreciate your comments, Stig, and actually, that's pretty much the message tonight. Is we're really trying to reinforce all the excitement that we have about SP3. We've got the lead product designer for the creative finishing products here. He's our, he's the straw that stirs our drink. He's the big toe, the captain of the toes. Oh, wait a minute. Wait, that's not Philippe Soireau. Wait a minute. That's Captain Picard. He does look like Philippe Soireau. Okay, the real bio slide. Okay, that was good, though. Yes, so Philippe is really, he's a legend in this business. He's actually our smartest guy on our team, and we love having him. He can't stand all these compliments. But we love having him here because you're going to not only talk to us a little bit about the new version, which you have some pretty strong opinions about. You and I
usually do have strong opinions about
You have a lot of
stuff.
strong opinions about a lot of things, including what you eat in the food chain. Yes. But the interesting thing in our conversations has been a bit of your frustration around trying to convey all the goodness in this new version, and there's been a lot of conversation. Let me just say that some people actually have come to me and said, the new version is really cool. I see you took kind of the best of Flame and Smoke, Advanced. You took the reels. You took the timeline, you kind of cobbled them together. That's cool and everything, but so what? And in our conversation, I know you're a bit frustrated because there is so much new functionality that may not be apparent when, at first glance. And I think it would be really good for you to kind of take us through that and sort of express, some of your feelings around a lot of the intentional things that you did when you did this redesign of the new UI and workflow inside the Flame Premium 20th Anniversary Edition. So please take us through that in our first section of our presentation tonight.
I'll try to do that. I certainly won't make like a complete overview of really what the workflow is, but at least I would like to try and shine a spotlight on some of the things that have actually happened in this workflow transition. We actually communicated in a somewhat abstract form about what it is that we were doing on the Linux side, about creating really a new creative environment, which is really the very tight collaboration between Batch that is now surfaced really as a view in the application, and the desktop and the timeline, really as a triangle that each one support each other. And a lot of communications and intercommunications between those 3 essential components of what we think are is the creative articulation of the application. So in doing that, we realized that there's a number of things that can only actually be understood once you start using them. And I'm by no means what I'm going to show you is more just to point out a number of things as options that you can use and you can choose to use in your workflow. It's not meant to say this is how you should be working. Just to start with one thing, as I said, actually we had these conversations together.
You need to pick up the pen and start going.
I'm going to pick up the pen. Yeah, you're right. We had these conversations actually also with your team, Bill. But I said we should really move away from the notion that we are dealing with modules. We're no longer dealing with modules. You're no longer going into batch. We're actually working with views, and you can switch instantaneously between the various views of the application that actually allow you to perform tasks that are common inside of the application. I want to stress the fact that this is really instantly navigating through different parts of the application that allow you to solve specific problems.
All those various modules that used to enter have all been raised to the first level of the application.
Yes, and this is also with a clear intention of actually really promoting batch as a primary creative content generation. And we feel very strongly about this, that Flame has always been about the conjunction of being able to manipulate clips, but also being able to create content from scratch. Batch is an extraordinary environment to do that. And we've also been trying to evangelize another concept, which is a clip is a timeline, is a composition, and is a flow graph, and they're all interchangeable. And actually that summarizes pretty much a lot of the things that is driving this redesign. And as we actually progress in the future, you should see more and more of that actually becoming concrete examples in your workflow.
They're all the same thing, just represented slightly differently, but they're circular. So if you're in batch, if you want to make that output, turn it into a BFX clip, you can do that. You can drop that into your timeline, vice versa. You can explode a clip into a batch setup. This is all the beauty of the new version.
Yes, exactly.
It's really the advantage.
Again, the point being that those views should be really interchangeable, and really those views you should be using depending on what it is that you're trying to achieve.
Right.
So we do think also that the future of Flame very much should be story-centric, because a lot about the creative process actually involves story at one point or another. So I'm just going to focus just a bit more about the relationship that is relatively new between the desktop and the timeline. So we just didn't stack the reels on top of the timeline. We actually created a very tight connection between these different elements. So just to illustrate this is when I actually select a clip, and clips support explicit selections. As I navigate through the reels, you see that I'm actually systematically displaying the actual timeline of the source element that I'm using. I'm actually using the keyboard at this point to show this. And this is a completely bidirectional relationship that is going on here. So if I start actually scrubbing here, holding the arrow keys, it's actually happening also in the proxies.
Right, so really the point is that the desktop is not just for looking at stuff and organizing it anymore. There's a connection that you have between the desktop reels, the clips on those reels, the timeline underneath, and it's actually integrated even further in that it actually supports a timeline that's multi-layer.
Yes.
And the structure is then reflected in the clips in a storyboard mode on the reels themselves.
I'm going to illustrate that actually. So yes, that's a very good point. But just again, is to say that we have a very tight connection, and things that typically would be timeline driven can be driven directly from the desktop, because you have both views actually happening. So if I want to add an endpoint, I can do that right here. And again, it's being applied to the same clip that I'm actually manipulating at this point. If I lose track of what it is that I'm manipulating, double-clicking it actually centers it back onto the reels. But let's talk more about things that have to do with sequences. So for the sake of the example, I decided to actually put multiple sequence, which is the new name that we give to, let's say, timelines that have more than one edit. Okay.
Okay.
So if I click on these guys, you see that they are a bit more complicated timelines. They're not just sources. Okay. So I put them all in these different reels, and another new workflow actually says that if you want to really start using the timeline and perform source record type of operations with the desktop, well, you just drag them into the tab, and you've actually opened them, all of them. So
cool.
Anything that was actually here inside of these reels, so you're free to very much continue to work. And this is more, I guess, for Smoke Linux operators who perhaps feel that we've lost a number of things. Well, we didn't really. You can actually organize things in your reels, have all of your sequences there. If you want to open them, just drag them into the tabs. It opens them. If you want to close them, just hit a hotkey and they go away, and you've closed them. When you open them, you're actually editing them in place And at this point, as you see, I can, again, navigate through the different tabs. I'm not using the pen at this point, but of course, it's just to make a point, really, at this point about the interaction that I have. And let's take an example. So here I have 3 different sequences that are quite different and use different footage from, different sort of footage. So I've got some BMW here stuff. I've got some Art Beats clips and some other stuff here of the, what's the commercial?
This is Soul Headphones. This is all from Kieran Walsh from Carbon VFX.
Yeah. Just, okay. So I'm going to switch. Let's say if I wanted to take a look at the BMW stuff and focus just on a section. Here's to explain also why we decided to introduce something which is, I would call it a variable geometry in the desktop. So let's say I just want to focus on my sources that are BMW sources in this particular sequence that uses that footage. It is very intentionally that we decided to allow you to deactivate some of the things that are momentarily not required for what you're doing and actually start focusing on something that is specific to what it is that you're trying to do. So at this point, if I hit F5, I can actually start scrubbing through the timeline. And as you see, this is my sequence here that is updating, okay? And the very key thing, again, is that this is a one-to-one relationship that exists between the desktops, what's being shown in the desktop and is currently being displayed in the timeline. If I hit spacebar C, which actually shows you the storyboard view, you have something really interesting that happens. The desktop actually acts as a visual filter over the editorial structure. And it actually is going to show you exactly the layer of the timeline on which you actually have the focus. So if I do a page up and page down, watch the storyboard view actually shifting and actually showing you exactly stuff that is currently being displayed at the level of focus that you have. I can still navigate between the different shots here, but it's actually presenting me only with the operations that I'm interested in, okay? So if I look at this other timeline here, so here this is this is a vertical stack here, which I just created for compositing. And so let me go again just to make the same point that I did earlier on, switch back to the reels here, and deactivate the BMW, and again, show again those clips here. And here's what's interesting is that, again, there are operations that you can perform either gesturally, but also driven by hotkeys that can now work. So for example, this is just a stack. So even though if I'm in storyboard view, it won't make a difference at this point. But let's say I would want to just change one specific layer within that stack. I could do it directly using hotkeys from the desktop and actually have the visual feedback of that. So let's say for the sake of the example, I would want to use this particular child here in my stack and swap it into the multi-layer stack. I could actually first decide to go to a specific frame. So I don't know, let's go to frame 5 here. And then here on this specific layer, I want to change the runner. I hit spacebar S, which is the swap shot hotkey. It's actually saying, oh, you're in swap shot mode now. And I select the particular clip, and boom, it was replaced within the stack, which is something that you could have not have done really easily in the desktop before. This is, again, to drive the point that the desktop is a lot more than just a bunch of reels. It is something that intrinsically enhances the editorial operation and really is a visual help and assistance to whatever is represented in the timeline.
And again, it's not apparent at first glance, right? So this is all this new functionality that you built in with a lot of thought put into it to make people's lives easier. It's actually, in my opinion, it's basically a new UI for editing built specifically for flame artists, because that's the way we think with pictures and a relationship between the timing and a broader sense of your overall context of your timeline, but with clips that you can easily navigate through and replace shots and append shots.
Again, what's fabulous about the desktop is the fact that it's a visual tool, and again, it's kind of like an intermediate between something that's a player that is kind of restrictive, because when you're in a player, that's the only thing that you see here. You lose track. I mean, the timeline still actually shows the editorial structure, but the desktop is kind of this interesting hybrid where you actually still have some notion of what's next and what was before, and a very strong visual representation of that on top of it. So I just wanted to point out that there are really a lot of things actually that support editor, things that you do on a day-to-day basis in a finishing workflow, like replacing shots and providing you with actually means to very quickly bring your new versions and actually do the swap shots and do them even in a multi-layer timeline environment, multi-version environment. So from my perspective, it is actually more efficient than it was before. But I realized that it will take some adjustment. I want to make another example, actually, perhaps just to drive another point as to how we want to. We think that people should embrace the actual duality between a clip and a timeline, and the fact that it can be transformed into a flow graph. We can talk very quickly just about how you would add a time warp, and lots of Flame users would immediately resort to using the time warp tool in the Tools tab. And of course, if you want to continue to do that, do so, okay? I just want to point out the fact that now, due to the very tight integration, again, you can just type something. So let's say this is the clip that I want to do a 50% time warp. I just punch 50 in the calculator. The calculator appears immediately, and then the Control-T hotkey for the time warp is actually going to immediately create the time warp. It's difficult to beat the speed of doing that from my perspective, but some people could argue that they're still faster with the desktop tools. Take that challenge.
Yeah, actually, and that's part of the theme tonight, right? We want to try to show some of this new functionality, expose it to the users because maybe they weren't, didn't realize it at first, and also, encourage them to adopt the new techniques. Again, something you've done for 15, 20 years. Maybe it's a little bit hard at first, but
I had to go through myself.
Yeah, you had to do it, and we've asked Vico has actually gone through it. So there's a lot of people, a lot of beta users here tonight that have gone through it. But once you get to that other side, you never want to go back, right? So that's the message I've heard. So we've talked a little bit about that. I'm glad we got that point out because I wasn't a parent of all those nuances in the new version in terms of the editorial functionality. Let's talk a little bit about a tip and a trick. I'd like you to just show, we've got lots of those that we want to, talk about. Oh, you got one more?
Well, there's one more thing that I wanted to.
We've got more on our agenda tonight.
I just wanted to point out one thing also, is that, again, as I said, it's been a strong thought for us to make sure that we created a very connected environment between the different components.
Okay.
And again, this notion of interchangeable representation. So I showed you this example where, there was a stack of different layers here to actually perform a composite. Now, this is something that I can actually take into batch and just drop it on top of the batch section will actually instantly take me into batch with the clip that's here. So at this point also, if I double click on it and actually, this is a stack that's ready for compositing. I actually want to go and do some compositing.
You timed it on the timeline.
It was timed with the timeline, exploded, that's it. It's fed into an action. There again, it's a whole bunch of detail that we've put in place to make sure that you can actually very easily bring stuff from the desktop, take it into batch, convert something that was first a clip because it was more suitable to perform a timing operation using the timeline, transform it back into a flow graph. And you hinted earlier the Create BFX stuff that actually allows you to go the opposite way around also and actually encapsulate a complex flow graph into a clip that can then be put back into an editorial structure. You can pretty much take it whichever way you want. So we're not saying you should work like this, but here's this kaleidoscope of interchangeable concepts that you can use to your benefit. And at the end of the day, we think actually it kicks ass.
I prefer to say motif instead of kaleidoscope, but that's just me. All right, so let's talk, again, I think point taken. The new workflow, the triangle, your triangle, makes sense.
And the square. A clip is a timeline. It's a composition. And
now
it's
you're
a flow
going
graph.
crazy. All right, let's talk about a tip and a trick because this is the audience for it. So maybe there's something that you brought for us that's kind of interesting. One of your favorite little maybe unknown.
So it's something that I've been. I just sat down actually with an engineer in Montreal and said, I can't get my head over the maths of actual reflections and how you could do like a mirror plane. And of course, ideally, I'd want to have a mirror object inside of Action. So that's kind of like a feature request that's coming. But in the interim, how can you actually figure out doing something that would actually behave as reflections? So I have an example here that actually shows the end result, where I actually have a scene here, and I'm actually orbiting the camera around, and you will notice here that I actually have reflections that appear to be computed correctly. You see, as I actually move my object around here,
It looks like a setup that Victor would send me.
You see, it's actually really behaving consistently. If I actually do some rotation, it's actually also being reflected inside of the mirror. If I, again, orbit around, it's consistent also with the position of the camera. And so let's see how you can actually achieve that using two action setups. And one action setup actually has both cameras to do the main scene, to shoot the main scene and actually create a camera that assumes the angle for the reflection. Okay. So let's take a look quickly at that. So I actually pre-created it because there's a bit of a construction there. And so let's focus on this particular area of things. The trick really is if you want to have a mirror surface, and this is my mirror surface, I'm actually going to decompose the position, the rotation of X, the rotation of Y, the rotation of Z, and this is then going to be my mirror plane that I position in 3D space, okay? That's very important to do that because that's what's actually going to drive the math to actually invert the camera for the reflections, okay? So if I want to move my mirror in 3D space, I would actually go ahead here and use the position axis to move it around. Okay, if I want to rotate it, use on the Y, on the X, I actually need to use the actual correct axis. Now what happens is that after that hierarchy, I have an axis that only does a -100 scale on the Z axis. That's all it does, okay? And then after that, I actually have nodes that do the exact invert, but look, it's the opposite order. So if rotation Z was the last one that you performed in the chain, after that you have rotation Z, which is the first one, followed by rotation Y and rotation X. They're connected to their counterpart via an expression that negates them. Okay, that's really the trick. Same thing with the position that you see is at the very end of the chain here, okay? And it actually really negates the position of the original mirror. Now what you do is you create a second camera here, and you parent it to the last node in the chain here. And to finally create the output, you actually do a duplicate link between the original camera of the scene and the mirror camera. And at this point, I created two outputs, F4, which actually is my main output, and I also have a second output, which is the output from the second camera, which is the reflection, the point of view from the reflections. And they're tied together by the expressions. And then I just create a matte of the mirror surface and just use a second action to do the blending. And it's a very basic blending.
Yeah.
It's just the original main scene plus my reflection, the render of my reflection that's been pre-multiplied with the mirror matte in a screen mode. And that's actually enough at this point to be able to, if I switch again to Alt-2 and F4 on this one, actually to create the illusion of reflections. And again, if I want to illustrate what happens, let's take a look at what happens in the first action. And I'm going to switch to the side view and switch back the icons so that you see what actually happens there. As I orbit my camera around, you see that the two cameras are kind of connected together and actually shoot the same scene based on where the reflection would be if you were looking at it from the camera POV. So it was just figuring out the math. So I actually asked a PhD engineer in Montreal to say, oh, I can't figure it out on my own. What's the thing that I'm missing? And the thing that I was missing was the actual -Z scaling in the middle. And then it works. And it's, I don't know what you think, but I find it pretty cool.
I think it's very cool. It's very, do you speak Vulcan? Because I think that's, quite logical to me.
Yeah, sure.
All right. All right. So as we kind of wrap up your section of the presentation, I wanted to just ask you a little bit about SP3, which we're announcing or targeting for a release date of end of May, early June. Can you just speak a little bit about your point of view on it? I mean, I'm hearing a lot of great things from my team about the enhanced performance and stability and.
Sure. So SP3 is a lot about listening to the users. Of course, we couldn't make such a huge workflow shift without breaking a number of eggs to do an omelet, and so we did break a few. And we listened to the feedback, and people were obviously had issues with some of the things they felt were regressions, like the performance of the desktop, but also the performance of the Media Hub, like the speed at which you browse to actually get media and things like that. And I'm happy to say that SP3 actually solves a lot of these problems. So the desktop is back to its original performance. You should feel its original snappiness that you knew before. Same thing would be applicable also to the Media Hub, that is by an order of magnitude faster than what was originally released.
Yeah,
providing
I heard some shocking numbers on that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it provides a much smoother, much more agreeable experience when you're importing, exporting stuff. The application is a lot more verbose also about what it's doing, so you no longer wonder, did that export work?
Right.
Or not. We actually tell you what's actually happening, and if there's a problem, we also tell you that there's a problem.
Right.
So I think overall, and there's lots of small details actually that were ironed out, and it would take a lot of time to go through them, but at the end of the day, I think Flame is that the fact that the workflow works is a collection of small details, and people were saying, at the end of the day, the workflow looks cool, but it's all these collection of small details that I'm hitting that are stopping me from using it the way that I want, and so I'm happy to say that I think we've actually ironed a lot of them out.
Excellent. I'm excited to hear that. And actually, you're going to see right now we're actually handing out some glasses of champagne. So try to hold off for a little bit. We're going to till everyone gets a glass, because we're going to do a little toast. But before we get there, so while the glasses are coming out, I brought Vico up, Vico Sharabani from The Artery, who's one of my longtime friends, an awesome Flame artist. And he's been working with us over the last several months, basically giving us his feedback and actually broadcasting his feedback through the use of blogs on the area, and also a webinar that we did together. And he's learning the new version. So I wanted to ask him for his impressions about that learning curve that we're trying to encourage everyone to jump over in terms of learning the new version. So Vico, what do you think?
Well, for me, it was, I think I've communicated it very, very clearly. I was extremely resistant in adopting the new software. But actually, the first week that I tried it, we had to deliver 250 shots of film work, and just dropping them into their specific folders with the old software would have taken a day. In here, we just dragged and dropped it, clicked name/name, and all of a sudden everything, we saved a lot of time and effort. So that kind of, I
that
knew
encouraged
that
you to keep going.
Yeah, encouraged me to keep on going. And actually, I didn't feel like an early adopter, because I heard people like Victor and Wally Rodriguez that they gave their positive feedback.
Yeah.
So for me, that was a big encouragement.
Yeah, Tim Crean as well.
Tim Crean, definitely. So I tried it out, and for me, it was very easy to understand the benefits. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was a tough one. The muscle memory of 20 years or 18 years is, something that you don't read the buttons anymore. But so that was tough for me to figure out where the new buttons are. But the benefits were so much greater than the hiccups for me. So
yeah, and I noticed today when you were doing your presentation here, you were, really living and breathing the new version, and you were telling me that, you couldn't go back at this point.
No, I've been doing demos for many years, and every time I prepared a demo for NAB, I prepared those multiple batch setups and a couple of libraries, and I brought everything in here, and now I got only 4 clips. One of them is in a live music video. All of the material is there. All of the setups are there. I don't need to tell people where I saved the setups, where is the green screen materials, where everything is in one timeline. For me, it's a huge thing for not only working on a project, but also sharing it with the rest of my teams.
Yeah, and it's been actually a lot easier for us in terms of executing NAB, in terms of bringing our data here, your data. It took no time to restore, and we were up and running. So actually, Victor, I think of you when you adopted the whole new timeline batch effects workflow. was the same kind of thing. He just said, everything's in there, Bill. The whole timeline, everything's in there. It's like, well, wait, all the setups, I mean, everything, it's all there. So anyway, I appreciate your feedback. I appreciate hearing from you, and that validation is wonderful. I think at this point...
I want to point out something
go ahead.
I want to point out something about Vico, because actually he illustrates the fact that you have very different users who use the application very differently, and what Vico showed me in the way that he actually embraced the workflow literally short circuits the desktop, and he was very happy actually working like that.
Sure.
So it's just, again, it's that, you have multiple options. We don't corner you into working in one way. And I guess the intention, again, was just to shine a spotlight on, hey, you can also work like that.
Yeah, and maybe eventually he will say, that's the way I want to work. That's the flexibility. So I think at this point we have a lot of glasses out there. We'll continue to hand out some glasses, but I think the point of the glasses and why we've given a lot of champagne to the fans that we have here, friends and family, is because we want to say thank you to our beta users.
We absolutely do, yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, your experience working with the beta customers, people like Victor here in the front row. I see Brian Higgins there. I see Chris Cranis here. Please tell me, what do you want to say to these folks who've been helping us redesign the application after 20 years?
Well, let's be very honest. Okay, there we go.
Thank you. That was my way of getting a glass. I was really...
Thank you.
That was
Thank you very much. No, actually, we would have never actually...
Did you guys get some yet?
Is everybody...
Everybody kind of there? Because we don't have a lot of time, and we're going to open the bar up at the end, of course.
Yeah.
But please, there's a couple of words, a little toast to the beta users.
I'd certainly like to toast to the beta users, because there's no way we would be where we are right now without the actual help of the beta users. The fact that they accepted to take the risk also to embark on this journey. It was a very bold thing to do for Flame, a 20-year-old application, and there's no way we could have actually reached the level of polish that we're getting at now without the help and the passion of the beta users. So thank you very much to all of you guys, and really
to all of you guys,
kudos
thank you so much
for helping us out.
And thank you for the new design. Really, really love it.
Cheers.
Okay, with that, keep your glass going. You can keep it with you if you'd like.
Okay.
Oh, it's Moet de Chandon. Oh, my favorite. Okay, you need
this stool. Are you sure it's Moet de Chandon?
I'm being facetious. All right, you take this. And we're going to continue our presentation. I'd like to bring on another one of my favorite flame artists in the world, Cedric Lejeune. So for those of you who are not familiar with Cedric, he's actually kind of a world traveler. How many countries have you been to now?
27 countries.
How many?
27.
27 countries he's gone. He's like an extension of our team. He goes everywhere. He's got a company called Workflowers. He's a workflow specialist. He's a colorist. He knows a lot about grading. He knows specifically a lot about some of the new functionality that came into the 20th anniversary edition. And I saw he and Philippe geeking out, speaking Vulcan together earlier in the back.
It was French, actually.
Oh, that was French. Okay, yeah. French, Vulcan. And we brought him on because we wanted to do two things. We wanted to talk about the new ACES implementation inside of Flame, which a lot of people are saying is the best in class out on the market in terms of dealing with all the challenges around all these new camera formats and all these new color spaces, and how do we deal with all this wide gamut and high dynamic range, and how do we get the deliverables, and how do we feel confident that we have accuracy in this process. So we want to have you talk about that. So
well, as you introduced me exactly, I'm involved in some projects where color management is a challenge. And the funniest thing is really that over the last couple of years, what has changed is we used to have film on one side, video on the other side, and all those things tend to mix up. And now even on a very simple project, you will have a bit of Alexa, Red, 5D, GoPro. It's all in there, and you have to manage that. So previously, the way we deal with that in Flame is just go into your lookup table editor and, for example, enable a log tooling lookup table. But we all know what it is about lookup tables. You have your file, and now it's much more difficult because you have many sources. And then you start asking for lookup tables. You send a message on Flame News, say, hey guys, I have Alexa footage and a Rec 709, and send me lookup tables, and I don't know how to convert it. Can someone do something for me? It's something quite difficult. Well, just before, I would like to explain quickly what is a what is the gamma and what we're talking about with these two when we do use the lookup table editor. We play with the transfer function. The transfer function being the way you map your dynamic range into pixel code.
Okay.
So you could have a gamma is one transfer function, but you can also have log. So there was also this misleading about lean versus log, and then video being lean, but it's not really lean because you have a gamma encoded, and then you have the EXR workflow with truly linear stuff. So is it real linear or some kind of linear? And then on the film side, you have the log, so the Cineon log, the good old log, and then you have the red log, the Panalog, the S log, all those logs, and then you have lookup tables, and you have, here in Flame, you have this viewing thing where you can switch to lean, to log, to video, but what kind of log, what kind of lean, you know?
Sure,
Sometimes it can be very confusing.
Of course.
And now with the new cameras, what we have also is you have to deal with the gamut. That's something that comes with new technologies. That's also something that comes with new display technologies. We're able to show a larger gamut of colors. A red sometimes is a little more saturated. It's slightly different, maybe more magenta. And that's something to manage too. So for example, if you go inside the red camera import parameters, you have 5 or 6 different transfer functions to choose from. You have 5 or 6 different gamut to choose from. And that's definitely a challenge because you're there, you don't know what to choose, and you have to choose something, you know. And that's really a challenge and something that, well, a couple of us on Flame Use are kind of specialized in those discussions.
Yes.
And it always ends up with some kind of mixed feeling. So but that's not only on Flame. That's the great thing, is that it's absolutely everywhere. So that's why the Academy came with something called the ACES workflow. So it's both a workflow, a file format, and a color space.
A color space, yeah.
The goal really is to have something that is really wide, very high dynamic range, very wide gamut of colors. So technically, we go way beyond what we can potentially see, just to be future-proof. And also something where I can technically map all the sources I have.
Oh, this is future-proofing, knowing that wider is coming.
Wider is coming. That's the whole thing. You know, we have laser technology coming for projectors. We have things that are able to produce amazingly saturated colors, new technologies for the LED technology for the monitors. We can have more saturated colors and a wider gamut of colors. And that's a challenge. So the goal really is to standardize also the exchanges, not only the exchanges between the different departments in one facility, but also between different facilities, because even on simple projects, you have now more and more vendors working together, and it's also a big challenge for the industry. So what they came with is a concept where you have this big capsule thing is the wide ACES color space. And to get your footage in this wide color space, you will have what is called an IDT. So you have your original raw footage from your camera. That's the thing you shoot with. And this is the native color space for this camera. And this is mapped with a color transform. It is mapped to the wide color space. This IDT will be something that will be given by the manufacturer. So that's something standard for the whole industry, which is great. So no more about taking account of lookup table formats and things like that. It's something standard. And it's something that will map the colors in the right place. It won't transform an iPhone into a F65. That won't happen. But really, the colors will be in the right place. So if the camera is not able to capture, because it doesn't have the dynamic range, it's not able to capture the dynamic range, it won't be there. But it will match. Everything will be aligned. It means that if you have two different cameras shooting the same scene, the colors should be the same. And that's very important because we spend so much time when doing compositing trying to match things together.
Of course.
And it's more difficult now because we have all those different things to put together.
I think one thing is important to specify, and actually perhaps the diagram actually illustrates that to some extent, is that the ACES workflow is inherently modular. Essentially, it allows you to avoid scenarios that would dictate from the very beginning that you're going from A to Z, but in fact allow you to be extremely modular in the way, what's your source, what's your display, what's your output, and then decide, kind of like with a Lego game, how you assemble pieces of a puzzle to essentially get from one specific input to a specific output. That output can be a file format or a display device. Essentially, that's a key thing that is actually also reflected in the way that we presented the new color management system in the application.
Definitely, and it's also a big paradigm change in the sense we're moving from output-referred workflow where we just calibrate, for example, for film, we will calibrate in the DI workflow to the lab output. Now it's actually the reverse. It's the lab that calibrates to the AC's workflow, and we take care of all the colors that are captured on set. We take that, and we know, for example, if I have to deliver something 20 years from now, I will have all the colors, even though today maybe I'm not able to render that to a theater, maybe 20 years from now I will be able to do, and I will have the right sources to do so. So film gets in, it's calibrated to have exactly the same concept with the ADX. And that's the same on the output, what you have with the RRT. So you work here with a wide gamut of colors. You work also with a very high dynamic range. So it's rendered back to something that is manageable. And then it goes with the ODT to the different display technologies you have to use. For example, these DI projectors with the DCI-P3 color space, also Rec 709 for video or sRGB for the web. That's something that will be used both for the display and also for the deliverables. So all those problems that we face now, I mean, trying to delivering something to a client is definitely a challenge.
Of course.
It's a big question, a big request.
More and more each day.
Yes, more and more each day. That is something that is coming to help and standardize all those exchange. So let's take a look at how it's been implemented in Flame. So if we go back to our clip in here, I have a clip that has been shot with a Sony F35. So that's the Doohey's commercial, is that?
This is from Tui's from the Alt VFX in Australia. Those guys are actually here doing a guest demo for our animation products this week.
Cool.
This was a job we showed at IBC when we showed the 20th anniversary edition for the first time.
Yeah.
So it's a great example. It's a very practical example because we've just got a dog's breakfast, we like to say, of file formats you've got to deal with. Many different camera formats, many different color spaces to deal with. It's probably one of the tougher shots to compile together.
It is, definitely. And we have, so in here we have some video stuff. We have stuff coming from the Sony F35. So now if I go into my clip properties, if I go to RGB lookup table, now I have a new option that is the color transform.
Okay.
And this is where I will actually load my IDT.
Right.
I was talking about IDT right before, so I will just go import and go to my camera, and I have my Sony F35S log. And now it transforms that into the ACs, but my viewport is not configured yet to accept the ACs. So what I have to do is do the RRT plus ODT to make that work, so it replicates. I can see it properly on my monitor. So that's what I'm going to do in here. I will just load my ACs to graphics, and now I have what I'm supposed to have because it's all optimized for that display.
It's optimized for this display, right?
Perhaps one thing, just to make sure that people can relate also to the graph that you showed. It's always about the same thing. You have a transform that you apply on the source, and that transform essentially takes you into a color space that is actually going to be a connecting color space, not necessarily the color space in which you work. We can discuss that a bit later. But color management is systematically about associating something about the sources, something about the display, and something about the outputs. So really what you were describing is, first of all, the lookup tables at the source level, and in the blue pop-up is the stuff that affects the viewport, essentially ensuring that you're watching the material in the right conditions based on the type of monitor that you're watching it on.
Exactly. And you're completely right about the workspace and the connecting space. The ACs is very wide, but for some tools, it won't behave properly. And especially, I mean, if you're in a color grading environment, it might be all right because you will just change the orientation of your controls. But in a compositing environment, it might prove to be something definitely more challenging. So what you want to do is switch back to your comfort zone. And that when what you will do is just go back in here, and instead of importing just a default IDT, I will build my own transform to switch back to something that I'm comfortable with.
Actually, so while you do that, it's important to again mention the fact that so we realize the color management system is something that is essentially, it's inherently geeky, and it's somewhat complex to figure out. Ultimately, we would love for all these things to be automatically set for you guys. But the implementation is actually very robust and sound. So you actually can piggyback multiple transforms, just like the diagram illustrated. It's a Lego system that allows you to then create the color transform that takes you from whatever input to whatever display device that you choose. And the color management system will actually concatenate things into a single transform if you want to make it easy for a user. Say, hey, use this, okay? Or make it available directly in the viewport as an option. So even though we expose the complexity of the ACES workflow, we also allow you, for example, to concatenate everything into something that is more manageable and can be then pre-configured for a user.
Exactly, that's what I have here with these export buttons. It will take all my different blocks in here. So as you said, it's legal blocks one after the other. Yep. I can have just a set of different different operations I can do on that. And then at the end, I will just export that to something that will be my standard. For example, for F35, I have several layers that come from the F35. I do my F35 import, and then I can replicate that to my different F35 clips. Come in here and just reload it. That is my project. And
there you go.
Yeah.
So essentially, in this example, what you were taking like was it F35 footage that you were using?
Yes.
So it was momentarily promoted into the connecting space, that's ACES, and then performing a change of primaries so that you can continue to work in Rec 709 primaries, even though you're technically still dealing with scene linear material. It's been linearized at this point, so it's truly linear at this point, yet using the Rec 709 primaries, which are very commonly used for a lot of jobs. And actually, even in the CG world, a lot of people still continue to work as RGB primaries, sometimes without even knowing it. But
yeah, that's actually a very good point. And you have to connect and you have to do all that. And about this, so what I also did is on my viewport, change my ACs to graphics. And now I have a linear 709 to graphics. And now I have exactly what I used to have. That is something very important because now all of my tools, I just behave the way I'm used to. It's just a regular linear workflow, and you might consider that since you have a narrower gamut in my clip, but not because we are all in floating points, so that's not a problem.
Yes, that's an important thing to say. Is changing the primaries does not necessarily translate into losing data. We would actually remap anything that would be outside of gamuts as negative values, and if this is a problem during the compositing, of course you can clamp that data. But if you don't want to clamp it, it's there.
Jerome,
we got a big no from
front row. Jerome
Jerome.
from ILM is like, no, you can't do that. No. Don't want
I'm just saying you can. If,
you could, but you wouldn't. At least you wouldn't at ILM.
I think the point is that it's non-destructive, inherently non-destructive.
Okay, so we need to move a little bit faster through this. So you have a bit more content that you want to walk us through?
Yeah, the last thing I would like to show is something very common we have to deal with every day, especially people dealing with labs. You know, you receive a DCP from another country and you ask to change something in a pitch-up to regionalize it. That's something where typically you call Cedric to get a lookup table to convert your XYZ color space to something you can actually work on.
Sure.
Now it comes, so that's less work for me, but that's all right. So you just
we're taking work away from you with this new ACES workflow.
The good thing with that is you bring a lot more, so that's good.
I still think you're relevant.
So the other thing, again, I will just build something to just convert it back to something I can work on. So I will just remove my gamma, because I have a gamma of 2.6. Remove 2.6 gamma, change my primaries to something, again, exactly the same. I was XYZ, and I want to get that to Rec 709. And switch here to here, and we're good. So now I can work on that directly just by doing this change. And also something very important, considering the color transforms, that it's something that doesn't harm the signal as a lookup table, especially 3D lookup tables. Generally, they lack precision, and that's definitely something you don't want to use in your processing pipe. You know, you want to have it at the viewing or just at the end for the deliveries, but not something at the input of your processing pipe. In here, you have something that is much more transparent because it's basically very simple type of manipulation. So yeah, that's something that also very important, that this will translate directly into the Flame Premium grading environment.
Yes,
you know,
which I know you're an
Luster.
expert in, because you were the first person who ever demonstrated that product to me. So what we used to refer to as Luster.
Philippe at some point.
Luster.
It's true.
Luster is now a part of the Flame Premium package. It's still a standalone product, but you were the first person who ever demoed that. So you obviously have a lot of history there.
Yep.
And again, all of this ACES helps make sure that we're maintaining the consistency as we move around the application.
No, you're right, but actually it's a good point to mention it that it's actually supported across the two components of Flame Premium, and so we can actually guarantee at this point that an image that was loaded with a specific transform will load and show exactly in an identical fashion on the Lustre side.
Which again removes a lot of the headaches for the users and makes you have that confidence that what you're working in is actually accurate, which I know for Jerome he's obsessed with that. Okay, so what do we have to wrap up your section? Because we're going to move on to
really
one last
ACs,
portion of our presentation.
Yeah, just to tell that the ACs is something that is cool because it's an industry standard, so finally. But at the end of the day, it doesn't change the way you just get the benefits, but it's not something really new. You just have to convert it at the beginning, convert it at the end, and you just work the way you used to in batch, exactly the same. So that's great. Easy.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And during the cocktail, you'll obviously, both these guys will be available to answer questions. I have a lot of questions, like, again, I don't know if you were speaking French or Vulcan, but there was a lot of logical stuff that was expressed there that I can appreciate. All right, with that, thank you very much, Cedric. So that's Cedric Lejeune from Workflowers. Again, an extension of our team, someone that we're highlighting tonight because we actually have some interesting new announcements around some training resources that we're trying to promote here at this event, some master classes, which are actually at an intermediate level for those of you who want to try to adopt the new Flame Premium workflow in the 20th anniversary edition. Again, a lot of changes to the UI and the workflow, so a bit of a learning curve for existing users, but you'll get over that hump with some of the tools that we're announcing tonight. So Cedric has been a part of that conversation, and we also are bringing to the stage now Lynn Lepage. Lynn Lepage, I love that photo of Lynn Lepage, and she's a longtime Flame user. She's been a long-time trainer. I think she probably knows many, many of you because she trained you in the past. She's worked in support. She's worked doing many, many demos for us. She's created classes. Anyway, so she was the natural person that we wanted to partner with to create some new, interesting training resources, some online curriculum that we want to announce tonight, which should be available coming very, very soon. As well as some in-person training curriculum that she's created working with my team as well as with the product design team, the product development team. So we couldn't endorse more strongly the credentials of Lynn Lepage. And so thank you so much for coming all the way to NAB to be with us, Lynn. Really appreciate that. And we wanted to invite you as well to kind of promote these exciting new resources that you've so generously offered actually for us to use as the content as well. So a project that you worked on, you decided you would come and sort of share a tip and trick, and we could use that as a launching pad to discuss these new exciting announcements around training.
Yeah, so it's
all very welcome.
Nice. Well, thank you, Bill. Hello, everybody. So tonight I'm just going to show you one little tip, but as Bill mentioned, there is a lot of new video tutorials that will be online very soon on Flame Premium. And actually, there's 4 hours of free video available on the area. And specifically, there's a class about editing, a class about visual effects, and a class about grading.
Right.
So all tasks that we can do with Flame Premium.
Yeah, and we had this neat idea. We thought, well, let's do online master classes, 1 hour each, but have them correspond to really deep dive one day on each of those same disciplines, right?
Exactly.
So she built the big picture, which you could spend an entire day with her and others, which we're going to work on that as well. But basically going into all the details, but if you want to get started and just watch the 1 hour online basically master class, sort of a tutorial on some of the functionality in the new version, you can do that self-paced on your own time and get started that way. So it's kind of a nice combination of online and in-person training that you're going to be offering.
Exactly. And so the project I used to build these curriculum is a video promotion for a burlesque troupe based in LA.
Okay,
so
that's appropriate for Vegas, a little burlesque. A little burlesque.
That's a good topic to discuss at NAB. And this was produced by Golden Films, which is a production company based in Los Angeles.
Okay. And you did this entire video for them?
Yes, I did all of the VFX. There was actually 70 shots of visual effects for a 3-minute, 15 seconds promotion. So that's quite a lot. They were very ambitious. But that was very good material for the training.
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited about it. And we'll show you a bit of that at the end. We'll do a little teaser
Yep.
of that. Literally a teaser.
And we'll
So
finish
let's
with
talk-
a little piece of it.
Let's talk a little bit about the tip that you want to take us through today. And it actually highlights one of my favorite new features from the 2012 release, which was
Right.
the GMAS inside action, which just have totally changed the game on how people composite inside the action module.
Yeah, that's quite a recent tool. And also what I kind of rediscovered some of the tools while doing this training project. And all of you guys are doing, well, most of you are doing production work, and when you're right in production, you don't have time to experiment
Exactly.
with tools. And so I thought maybe you didn't have the chance to use the Gmasks in action, and they're really, really useful for certain projects.
So this is the footage that we're
Yep.
talking
So that's a
about
green
in
screen.
the new online tutorials and in-person training that Lynn shot.
Exactly. So
I don't know if it's controversial or not, but we are in Vegas, and it is.
hopefully everybody is 18 plus, so we're okay.
It's rated G in Canada, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so this is one of the shots that I had to build a composite for. And in this case, the only idea that the producer had for this scene was that they wanted something that was vintage airplanes to go along with the theme of the choreography. So I came up with one composite for this that I'll show you right now. So basically what I did with this one, I kind of animated some old aircraft, and I projected this to a screen in the back of the scene.
Right, and then you recomposited the curtains and things
Yeah,
like
just
that.
created some curtains with, just stills and things like that. So in this particular shot, there is a camera move. It's not a very extreme camera move, but I'll show you in a minute. I use the 3D tracker. So this is the composite that I delivered to the client. But one thing that I was not happy with was the floor.
Can you zoom out a little bit, because I think you were saying they just put like some brown paper
Yeah,
and
they kind
taped
of-
it on the ground. It didn't look nice. So
I don't know what
guess
they were thinking.
when
but,
you're generating 70 shots, maybe you're in a hurry, so but you wanted to fix that.
I wanted to fix that, and also, of course, I wanted to avoid to do roto on the legs and the shadows
Sure,
and
that would
things
have
like
been
that.
a lot of work, yeah.
So what I did, and I'm just going to show you. So basically, I piped the first composite into a new action node, and I used BFX clips. You're probably used to BFX clips, but I find them really, really useful. They're very portable. You can actually bring them all over the interface. And go in the timeline with them and explode them.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. You're bringing up the new functionality, but I mean, as you said, when you were creating this training material for us, you were learning the new version. So you're actually similar to Vico. You're sort of a test case for someone that had to get over that learning curve.
I was.
And you actually said you rediscovered the software, and it was fun, right? So you actually...
It was fun, and also I really enjoyed the open workflow, and it took me a little while to really understand the triangular workflow, but I think now I'm a fan. And,
If you hang out with this guy long enough, you'll be a vegetarian, and you'll be talking about triangles all the
yeah,
time.
we should have T-shirts with triangles and fishes and stuff.
I'm game.
All right. Yeah, so BFX is one thing, and also snapshots. That's my favorite. I
love
think that
snapshots,
are great. And of course, BFX clips, the nice thing about them is that you can always explode them, so you can always go back and modify anything that you did in your setup.
It's great.
So you can actually reconnect that to some of the things that I mentioned earlier in the presentation where, again, I'm going to say a clip is a timeline, is a composition, and they're all interchangeable. And it's a flow graph. And essentially, Create BFX is a very good example of that, where you can convert a flow graph back into a clip and actually use it also as a caching mechanism that actually uses the timeline infrastructure to cache frames directly into batch. So
And that's one nice thing. And also, in the latest release, SP3, you can also do your renders right inside batch. So I thought this was very
I
useful
like that
as
too.
well.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so you had
Yep.
this floor you needed to take care of.
Yep, so I'm just going to show you the setup here. So the first thing I did was to create a 3D track. although it's not a very extreme camera move, 3D tracks is very useful because then when you want to add elements in the 3D scene, it really helps to position them because it gives you a perspective grid.
Well, not only does it solve the camera, but it also gives you the point cloud, which represents the scene, and now you have a 3D environment that you can really manipulate.
And by the way, the object I want to talk about tonight is the G-mask, but just so you know, I also use G-mask to actually hide some portion of the clip for the 3D tracking.
Okay.
And once you're done with the 3D tracking, you can hide them once you don't need them anymore. So then I created point clouds for this and snap the objects to the point cloud. So that's something that you can do if you hold down the shift key.
Right.
But you need to activate that option in the preferences.
Okay.
So
Wanna
you
show
do
us
have
that?
to, so you have to activate shift snap. Otherwise,
snap.
it won't work.
Okay.
It will actually work snapping to anything at that point, not only a point cloud, but
Yeah.
also even an extended by cubic that's deformed. You snap instantly to wherever, whatever
And you can
vertex.
even snap the points,
Yes,
which is
absolutely.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
One other thing I just want to quickly mention about point clouds is you have different options as the axis behavior that you'll get when you add objects, and the default one is centroid. And for
Actually,
this
I
kind
think
of
the
thing,
default one is none, probably.
Can you hold it down?
no, it's centroid.
Oh, really?
No,
Okay.
Well,
She's the trainer.
Okay.
I don't
You're
know.
just the product
That's
designer.
usually what I
yeah.
see when I'm there, but it's either none or centroid. But basically, the centroid would just center your object in your 3D track. But for this kind of thing, the plane transform is really useful. Philippe, maybe you want to explain
No,
what
I
it
just
does.
want to point out that, I mean, maybe this is something that was overlooked. The point cloud actually has the ability to behave as an axis if you want to. So it's a shortcut to actually allow you to position something very quickly. And the centroid option essentially positions the object at the center of gravity of the point cloud, while the planar option is actually very useful if you track something that's obviously a flat surface, as it will try to actually adjust the orientation of whatever object you parent so that it goes through the maximum number of points in the point cloud. So it's a very quick shortcut to align something, especially if you track
then
flat
you just
surfaces.
need to tweak it a bit, but seriously, like it was
It's a good
almost in
start.
the
It
right
gives you a
spot
good head
right
start.
there.
I mean, this is a perfect example, right? So
Yep.
here you go.
And then also I used the substance texture to replace the floor.
So you generated your
Substance
own
materialize.
substance textures.
I used the presets, and
Okay.
this preset is the wood floor. I thought that wood would be nicer than brown paper for some reason.
Not as
Yeah.
good as wood. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that gave you, again, internally you generated that using substance textures.
And
Okay.
also, what is
So-
nice about substance texture, it's more than a texture. It's actually reacting to light in your scene, so you can relight the texture, which is really
You want to
really
say
nice.
something on top?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something that, so at this point you're in a scene, and this is actually a good segue into the GMAS stuff. You have a scene where you have objects that are actually placed in 3D space with perspective, and typically those are not very easily, so if you want to start, if you want to start doing transparency in regions, the regular GMAS that are applied to a media are definitely not very easy to use, because obviously then they're submitted to the perspective inside of action once they're represented in action. And really what you would need is something that exists literally in the scene of action to decide, no, it's really around here that I want my transparency. And it's one of the key things that, it was one of my frustrations at first, like, I'm not going to rotoscope with that. And you shouldn't, for God's sake. Don't rotoscope with a G-mask inside of action. It's not why we did it.
Right.
But we really did it actually as a complement to the media G-mask, because at the end of the day, there's nothing easier just to draw something in the scene and say this should be transparent or hidden directly in the scene, and it actually acts on top of all the perspective effects that you've done. And it's very important to actually understand that. Then you'll click, and I think it's a very cool feature.
Yeah. So just to follow, GMAS or scene-based, they're not media layer-based, but you can use the combination quite powerfully.
Absolutely.
So in this case, they're also exclusive, right? So you can assign them.
Well, that's the other thing. You can assign the two objects, with the GMask operator here, GMask link.
Right.
And you have a hotkey associated with this. And also you have different kinds of GMasks. Some of them are like basic shapes, like a circle or rectangle. You also have one which is the GMask plane. So if I had one to the scene, So this is kind of a wipe that could be used for different purposes. In this case, for example, I can fix the end of the floor and just create maybe a gradient
Sort of soften that
to
edge.
smooth that out. And so I can easily then just want to reassign it. So it's basically now floating, in the entire scene. And then I can reposition it. And actually, I should be able to connect this under the camera as well, I believe. Let's try.
And
So-
assign it to a specific object also if you wanted to.
Yes. So let's see. Yeah, so basically now that I have my 3D track, I can assign this so it fits with the rest of the scene. And one little thing that I really like with this, if I switch to add mode, and I can of course add points, but if I use the shift key, I can actually add gradient points to the mask, or can I?
Yes, you should be able to.
Apparently.
There you go.
All right. Yay. All right. So, so you can do this to any of the G masks. And one other thing is that these masks are 3D G masks. So they are in the scene. You can position them in 3D, so which is kind of nice. You cannot distort them, but you can really use them as objects in your 3D scene.
And
Cool.
one last thing perhaps to mention, I think you're going to show an example, or maybe you are, I don't know.
Yeah, well,
they
let's
also
see.
act as occluders for lighting effects. So
Yeah, so I
That's the
did use
last
them.
part of this, yeah.
Yeah, let's see. I'll show you, but the problem I had with this setup is that I had like literally 30 seconds before presenting this, and I might have messed up my light. So let me just check.
It's
Right,
okay. I
so,
mean, we can talk it through.
can be a bit indulgent with me.
Yeah. So
Right,
I just
so,
want to kind of, as we're wrapping up, I just want to sort of point out that, again, Lynn and Cedric collaborate quite closely. They actually both basically cover the world. He takes one half, she takes the other half of the world. So we have all their contact information if anybody wants to get more.
move.
And we splitted the world into.
Move. So that way, if depending on where you are in the world, maybe one of them is closer to you. They also speak different languages, obviously French, Quebecois,
Yes,
which is a
and,
version of French.
Montreal.
Stuff.
Vulcan.
Vulcan and English.
Yeah, I'm still learning Vulcan, but I'm getting there.
Yeah.
Yep. So you can use Gmask on volumetric lights, which I thought was really interesting. So you can actually have rays and then
soften the
occlude some
edges,
parts
yeah.
as well, and decide, for example, in this case, that the light will only hit the floor
Yeah.
with the substance materialize. And
You
one
could-
more point, I
ahead.
think you mentioned it, but if you use, for example, substance texture, media Gmask won't work on them. So
No.
this is
No.
another
Yeah,
reason to
because
use
it's a
the
generated,
masks
content.
in
So-
action.
So that was a neat deep dive on the GMASK capabilities and functionality. I appreciate that little tip. That's tip of the iceberg on what
Well,
you
that's just one
created.
little thing, of
One
course.
little thing. Let's
There's
move
so much more.
There's so much more. Let's move forward because I want to wrap up and then we'll start the cocktail. There's a few last little things I wanted to mention, specifically around Lynn and her participation tonight, because again, I mentioned this new online training materials. We've actually labeled this taking a project from A to Z or A to Z, depending on what part of the world you live in. This is going to be a great series of 3 one-hour master classes on the new version, corresponding to the 3 different disciplines: editing and conforming, visual effects, grading. So thanks to Lynn for that. And again,
Play back the final.
what was that? Oh my God, yeah, we have to go back and see that. So I just want to reference that. Let's switch back to Lynn, and we're going to play a little teaser from the content. This, again, is the content that she so generously offered to use for this project.
Rated G in Canada.
Yeah, it's for kids.
My name's Anne, I got a plan. I may lack virtue, but I'm penitent. To lose my mind is never easy. Shadows still look way to me.
All right, so that's just a little bit of it. I couldn't show you the rest because
Yeah,
it's a little bit racy, but you'll see it online. We also wanted to mention that if the contact information for both Lynn and Cedric is on his website, workflowers.com.
We're both there.
Yep, so please check that out. I also wanted to just sort of reiterate some of the themes from tonight. Again, this was a great user event. I really appreciate everyone's time coming out. We're going to have some networking afterwards, but really the main point is that we believe very strongly in the direction for Flame Premium. The decisions that you made for where you want to take the application, I think we're really on the right track with that. We're investing very heavily in online training resources. People like Lynn and Cedric are going to be available to train the Flame community. We really want to translate that into your adoption
Just
of
want to
these.
mention too that there's other instructors that are certified instructor from Autodesk,
Yes.
and some of them are here tonight in the room. Yeah, my
Yes, we
friends
have
there.
several others.
Yes,
We're going to have
Sibylla
an
and
ACI sort of get together and
Tomorrow, so there's instructors also in other regions
Yes.
of the world that are available to you, and if need be, like again, if you want to contact us through the Workflowers, we can also put you in contact with
so just get in
local
touch with Lynn and
instructors.
Cedric for more information on the ACI program. And then there's SP3, what we're showing here on the booth. We're really excited about this version. It'll be in your hands end of May, June timeframe. And finally, I just want to say that we're really committed to the new version and making it everything that you guys really need it to be. And we're going to get that right. No question about it, right, Philippe?
No question about it.
No question about it. So with that, I want to thank everyone for coming out. Let's go forward in another slide. There's another.
We have to do the draw.
There's the Flame Award as well, and we're going to have we're also going to have the drawing. The Flame Award. So, Lisanne, what do we want to say exactly about the Flame Award? Do you want to talk about it? The nominations are now open for the Flame Award. So this is something that kind of Lisanne came up with. It's a neat idea. If you go to area.autodesk.com, you can read more about it. But there's a contest that we're going to be running from now until IBC. And we're going to have all of the Flame community vote on different candidates. You can nominate someone. You can't nominate yourself, but you can nominate someone else that you think is deserving of the Flame Award. And there's a very awesome prize that can't really talk about right now, right? But there's a cool thing that I know is in the award for that actual award. So be thinking about that. And now it's time for the drawing, right? So let's go ahead and pull out a card. You must be present to win. Remember, this is going to be for the HP Dreamcolor monitor that Larry Mahoney mentioned earlier. All right, who is going to be the lucky winner? It is Joel McCluskey. Joel, oh my God, thank God.
We got a winner.
Thank God. Joel, I've never been happier. Okay, please come up here. Shake my hand. Thank you so much for coming to the event. And now, check with Lisanne. She'll give you all the details on how we'll get that prize to you. With that, again, we're really excited about the new version. I'm really happy everyone came out tonight. Thank you, Philippe. I want to thank all of our presenters, Lynn Lepage, Cedric Lejeune. Really loved all that. I want to thank everyone for coming out. And now let's have a drink and celebrate NAB. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.